pretty confident in my stance on billionaires. I don't think there should be a system in which a person is able to hoard so much wealth while other people struggle to put food on the table, until Taylor Swift became one. At which point I thought, if all billionaires are unethical, does that mean Taylor Swift is just as bad as Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos? And do I have to stop being a Swiftie? And shouldn't we be celebrating women being able to make this much money, considering that not even that long ago we weren't even allowed to own property? As much as it pained me, I knew all too well that I had to investigate this one. We hate billionaires, right? Billionaires are awful, shouldn't exist. How do we feel about Taylor Swift becoming one though? So grab a snack, grab your favorite hot drink, because this one is gonna be a juicy, juicy deep dive. There was so much that I didn't know about billionaires before I started scripting this and filming it, so I'm gonna take you on that journey with me. Let's go. Let's start with how someone even becomes a billionaire in the first place. So Forbes releases their yearly list of billionaires every year, since it's a yearly list, and this year there were 2,640 people on it. You can make it onto this list if all of your assets, like the property you own, the stocks that you have, all of that minus any debts and liabilities adds up to over $1 billion. Let's just pause and put that into perspective, because it's actually a ridiculous amount of money. Oxfam reports that if you had saved $10,000 every day since the first pyramids were built in ancient Egypt, you would still only have 1/5 of the average fortune of the world's 5 richest billionaires. It's truly baffling. On the one hand, it's true that billionaires themselves aren't so much the problem as the entire system that allows them to become billionaires in the first place. The statement billionaires shouldn't exist doesn't mean that we should go around personally killing every single billionaire or that they shouldn't be alive. I'm filming this on bonfire night and that's fireworks, and that's... okay, they're gone. So the statement billionaires shouldn't exist doesn't mean that we should go around personally killing every single billionaire. It's the idea that no one should be able to accumulate this much wealth in the first place. But on the other hand, no one becomes a billionaire accidentally. You have to take advantage of this broken system in some kind of way. Or so the story has usually gone. But the story so far, at least in videos about billionaires on YouTube, has definitely revolved around the old white male entrepreneur version of billionaires. But not that entire list is made up of those people, although granted, they are definitely at the top for reasons that are pretty obvious, but we'll go into a little bit deeper in a second. But is being a billionaire a different thing for a woman or a person of color? Let's find out. One key way that people like Elon Musk can continue to be billionaires and to even grow their fortune is because they benefit from tax cuts from the government. They can manipulate all of their assets and their spending in incredibly clever, well, is clever the right word? Snaky ways through their immense legal teams that they have to make sure that they basically end up paying next to no taxes. And to help get the laws passed that facilitate these tax cuts, they will then also support certain political campaigns that will lead to people in power who will give them those tax cuts. David and Charles Koch of Koch Industries supported the Trump campaign when he became president, and the following Trump tax cuts then meant that they have been saving between $1 to $1.4 billion every single year as a result of those cuts. As a result of those same tax cuts, by the way, in 2018 it's estimated that the top wealthiest 400 families in America actually ended up paying a lower rate of tax than middle class people were paying. So those are ways that the government helps the rich to stay rich. But how do they get that rich in the first place to be able to benefit from these systems? Well, a lot of it just comes down to inherited wealth. Half of the approximately 340 female billionaires in the world right now have actually inherited their wealth, their heiresses. Julia Koch, for example, inherited her fortune from her husband Charles Koch when he died from Koch Industries. Nice to keep it in the family, right? Family traditions. About 60% of the wealth in America right now is inherited, so it's not that surprising that the wealthy continue to put laws in place that keep them wealthy so that they can continue passing that generational wealth down through, well, generations. Of course, that then feeds into issues like racial inequality and racial injustice, because the amount of black generational wealth in America is so much lower than white generational wealth. In the 2020 list of billionaires, only 7 out of the 600 plus billionaires in all of the US were actually black. Obviously, if you've inherited stock or just outright billions of dollars from a relative, then you're definitely not self-made. So let's set these people to one side for a moment and focus on people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, who claim to be self-made, with these stories of having pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and having started from nothing and created these amazing empires through their genius alone, I guess. This is just completely inaccurate. In the majority of cases, it's much less a rags to riches story and more of a riches to even more riches kind of story. Most of the people on this billionaire list, even if they didn't directly inherit their wealth, they benefited from immense wealth in their families. For example, Jeff Bezos often talks about how he started Amazon from his garage and built it from the ground up, but he often fails to mention the fact that his parents gave him $250,000 to actually get the thing started. Other people have benefited in more implicit ways from the connections, the opportunities, and the education that their upper class or upper middle class upbringing has been able to afford them, essentially by being born into the right household. That said, there are a few exceptions who make this a little bit more complicated, because let's take Oprah Winfrey for example. She really did come from literally nothing. Like, they were really poor when she was growing up, but she has now built up for herself this massive media empire and built this international name for herself from essentially nothing. That's just one of the first examples of women, and in this case a black woman, bucking the trends that we see with other billionaires who are white old men. But to call these people self-made is incredibly insulting to the millions of people that they are exploiting in the supply chains of these businesses that they've built. Their billions are built off the back of tons of working class people that they are exploiting. Amazon, which employs over 1 million people, is a really commonly cited example of this, with their warehouse staff regularly experiencing unfair, unethical working conditions. Not to mention that these companies are knee-deep in plastic and fossil fuels and unsustainable practices here, there, and everywhere. There's a reason why billionaire wealth is often measured in dollars, and that's because it's so inherently tied to the idea of the American dream, right? So if Kylie Jenner can do it, then so can I. I can become a billionaire if I just work hard enough. That's the story that people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are trying to sell you. And when you do reach that level of wealth, then you'll obviously want all of the benefits that come with it for the current billionaires, right? So it doesn't make sense to push for them to be taxed more, because you yourself could become a billionaire one day and you don't want that high rate of tax when you become a billionaire, do you? But actually only 0.002% of the US population will ever become billionaires. Apparently people in the US are just totally obsessed with billionaires and their stories of how they built these empires and came from nothing. If you live in the US, please confirm or deny how true that is, because I'm very intrigued. Let me know in the comments. But this leads to idolizing people like Musk and assuming that they are the best people to handle that amount of wealth, and that whatever they choose to do with it will be for the general benefit of society, because they're these like visionaries, right? They're these incredible entrepreneurs, and so they must have a really good handle on how to spend that money or how to not spend it. Well, if they're such visionaries, then explain to me how in the US, billionaire wealth grew by $2 trillion during the pandemic. That was an economically catastrophic period of time for most households. Where was the philanthropy then? Yes, a lot of billionaires give to charity, but most of them don't even give enough to stop being billionaires. So that says a lot. One person who has actually lost their billionaire status because of the amount of tax that they've paid and because of their charitable donations is actually J.K. Rowling. But that's still not a perfect solution. We should not be having to rely on billionaires and their philanthropy to support essential services for mental health or homelessness. More on that in a minute. So self-made billionaires are these cocktails of a healthy glug of daddy's money, a few drops of clever rags to riches marketing, a splash of government support to keep them rich, with just a pinch of inflated ego and hero complex. I'd take a mojito over that any day. Thank you. Safe to say that becoming a billionaire is inherently tied to privilege, which means that there are way fewer people of colour and women on these lists than there are white men. That said, women now make up 10% of the billionaires list. What an achievement, 10%, great. But don't forget that half of them are actually heiresses, which leaves us with a very small pool of self-made female billionaires to look at. So is this a yay for feminism moment? It's tricky, because if these female billionaires are operating in the same way, using the same processes and business models that their male counterparts are using the same loopholes in the systems and the tax breaks and all of this, then they're really no better just because they're women. I've already mentioned Oprah Winfrey and J.K. Rowling, who are bucking the trends of typical kind of male billionaires, but who else is there out there to talk about? We've definitely seen some of the world's wealthiest women coming out with statements that seem to suggest that they're not all that different from their male counterparts, and they are speaking from the exact same playbook. For example, with Kim Kardashian's comments that
it seems like nobody wants to work these days.
Or Molly May's "we all have the same 24 hours in a day" comments.
Beyonce has the same 24 hours in a day that we do. And I just think like it's literally, you're given one life and it's down to you what you do with it.
Or the less well-known Gina Rinehart, who is worth $16 billion off the back of her mining empire. She has said that if you're jealous of those with more money, don't just sit there and complain, do something. Easy, right? Let's take the problem of exploitation. Are female billionaires running their businesses in the same way that the men are and exploiting people and the planet? In some cases, yeah, they are. Rihanna, despite being one of the most well-known faces in the music industry, has actually become a billionaire largely due to her beauty brand, Fenty Beauty, and then further along the line, Savage x Fenty, the lingerie brand. Fenty Beauty made $100 million in its first 40 days of operating, but Fenty receives a not good enough rating by the brand rating platform Good On You for issues like not using eco-friendly materials or eliminating hazardous chemicals from its supply chain. Essentially, this is a classic celeb-driven fast fashion and fast beauty complex, with the main marketing angle being Rihanna made this, so buy it, please. This is something that a lot of other celebrities are also doing, not just Rihanna, so you can check out this video next where I talk all about how Rita Ora, for example, has done a very similar thing by collaborating with Primark, and there are plenty more examples of celebs doing this as well. However, there are some women on the billionaire list who seem to have honourable ambitions and are actually doing a lot for supporting women's causes. So they do exist. For example, Whitney Wolfe Herd, who is the founder of Bumble, previously the co-founder of Tinder. Time magazine wrote that she is like the Elle Woods of tech entrepreneurs. Following the painful story of how she had to leave Tinder because of harassment, and then the online harassment that followed after that, she built Bumble as a different kind of dating app where women message first to create a virtual safe space for women. She took the company public in 2021, at which point she became a billionaire at just 31 years old.
In a yellow power suit with a baby on her hip, Whitney Wolfe Herd joins a small group of self-made female billionaires.
Time wrote that she is selling the feeling of power to the powerless. It's pretty noble ambitions for a billionaire. That makes her a possible contender for this kind of unicorn that is the ethical billionaire. Not to mention that she did it in heels with a baby at her hip, so, you know, go feminism, paving the way for more women to get into tech and showing them that you can kind of do it all. Although I sort of hate that phrase because you can't do it all. Like, the only women that can do it all are the ones that have a lot of help and money to pay for that help. Which brings us on to the catch with Whitney Wolfe Herd, which is the fact that she probably wouldn't have got Bumble to where it is without investment from a Russian billionaire that supported her along the way, which meant that she didn't actually have to go through all of the hurdles that most women face when setting up a business. For everyone else, female entrepreneurs only secured 2% of all venture capital funding in the US in 2021. Don't get me wrong, I think that Whitney definitely deserves to be successful, but should she be a billionaire? does she really need, no, she doesn't need to be a billionaire. She can be a millionaire, you know, she can be rich, but like billions? So what about people outside of business and outside the tech industry? Is it possible to become a billionaire just through your craft alone, without investing in stocks or inheriting massive chunks of money? I mentioned J.K. Rowling earlier, the author of Harry Potter. So she has built her wealth due to the success of that book series and then also the saga of films. And as I mentioned, she is now not a billionaire because of the amount that she's donated to charity. On the surface, great, many more billionaires do give to charity. One of the most often cited examples is Bill and Melinda Gates, who founded the Gates Foundation. But who says that these people are the best judge of where that money should go and where it's most needed? They aren't, partly because they themselves are so far removed from the deepest issues in society, the ones that charities tend to support. And even if they did have a deep insight into that and a deep personal understanding of it, they are still only one person with one worldview. To put one single person in charge of so much money is crazy. That's so much power in one person's hand. And most of them are old white men's hands. It's undemocratic. Regardless, J.K. Rowling did become a billionaire through her writing, which brings us on to Taylor Swift. It's being claimed that Taylor Swift has become a billionaire through her music, setting her apart from most other billionaires on the Forbes list. She didn't have to launch her own side hustles or invest in stock. So Taylor became a billionaire through a mix of music royalties, touring, merch sales, streams, the value of her handful of homes, and notably the thing that tipped her over the line was the Eras tour film, which made about $35 million from the first 2 weeks of screening. So she's made all this money by giving people the gift of her music, right? Well, not so fast. First of all, her merch line is not exactly sustainability central, but also she topped the list of celebrity private jet emissions in 2022, with her jet having emitted over 8,000 tons of CO2. And that's when she wasn't even touring. That's not really the kind of chart topping that I think she wants to be doing. Her team have hit back at this, saying that other people use her jet a lot and she didn't actually personally make all of those flights, but that doesn't make it much better. The point still stands. Could she be as successful as she is without relying on these climate harming luxuries like her private jet for travel? Could she actually do what she does without having to rely on these things? We could say that the amount of money that she is injecting into local economies at every single step of her tour makes up for it, but I'm not convinced. Because what are those people buying? Like, what kinds of businesses are they supporting when they stay at the hotels and buy the food there and all of this? Are they supporting large corporations and companies, or are they supporting small local businesses? I don't have the answer to that, but it's an interesting question. Who is Taylor generating all that wealth for? There is a much broader conversation here about the sustainability of the music industry as a whole, and if you want me to do a separate video on that later on, then do let me know in the comments, because I think that'd be really interesting to talk about a bit more. But overall, Taylor is not a saintly billionaire, because it's potentially true that doesn't even, not just potentially, it's true that a saintly billionaire probably doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that you need to wean yourself off of Taylor's music or boycott her or anything like that. If anything, she is kind of testament to the fact that women are now able to make these ridiculous amounts of money, although maybe no one should be able to make these ridiculous amounts of money, and at least she's gone about it in ways that have avoided the slimy tactics of most male billionaires. That said, it's clear that just because someone is a woman on the billionaires list doesn't mean that they aren't subscribing to the same systems of harm as the men on that list. I am all for women earning the big bucks and taking back their power, but past a certain point, how many big bucks do they need when there are people who are literally living on the street and are experiencing food insecurity every single day? That wealth gap is just immense. Whichever way you cut it, when you compare the sheer volume of money that billionaires have with things like the cost of living crisis, it becomes impossible to justify the existence of billionaires as a class of human beings. So what should we do about it? Because that's a whole other video. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on billionaires, how you think we should be tackling this situation, and whether you agree in the first place that female billionaires can be very similar to male billionaires. How should we redistribute How should we, that's Christmas on my mind, Christmas is coming. How should we redistribute this wealth more equitably? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, then please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And until next time, stay kind and I'll see you later. Bye.